welcome back to part 2 of the Magical Backgrounds class. In this particular video, we will be focusing on project 3, which is all about making your background more dynamic and adding various elements to complete your story. And the rest of the video will be devoted to finishing touches, so finishing up what we started in the first video. And I like to come back a day later, take a good look at what I've created and decide very critically whether I'm happy with things or whether I'd like to revisit and rework the painting. So I'll be showing you what I do with these other pieces, and we'll hopefully by the end of this video you will see how we pull it all together. All right, are you ready to go? Again, my 12 by 16 canvas. I have this little lad, I'm pretty sure it's a little boy, and the tricycle. And then I have this mysterious older house. I cut it a little bit prematurely because I thought it might not fit. And then I have a sheep, which for me, animals always add a little bit more fun and flavor to a painting. They just pull it together in a nicer way. So anyway, here we have it, and I think this is kind of where I'm going to go with it. I also have this tree, so I have to think a little bit in advance of where I want things to be because I'm also planning my background. Again, if I do the land and sky, I want to kind of get an idea of where it's going to be. So what I might do is use a marking pencil to show where I would like my background to be painted and to be situated. Okay, so here I've lined up the painting more or less how I'd like it to look, and it's a horizontal painting. I'm going to use my marking pencil just to get an idea of the horizon, because that way it'll help me realize how much paint I need to use in the background for the land and for the sky. So I can take these pieces away and I'll just continue that line more or less in a simple way across the page, across the canvas. There, simple, but it does save me a little time. Why overpaint or use more color in one area than the other if I don't need it? The boy is really sweet looking, but I love the relationship between a face that's really sweet and possibly a little bit of a darker theme. So anyway, that's about me. In order to achieve this with the sky, I'm not just going with turquoise and white or turquoise and parchment. I'm actually going to add some gray to the mix, and that might give me more of my moodiness I'm looking for. I think it's worth trying and trying this out and seeing how it looks with the pictures. So the background sometimes shape the whole painting because that's the place I start, other than finding the images and trying to line them up. So, and by the same token, you can also change it completely if it doesn't work, by lightening it up, by changing the shade, by adding paper elements in or collage elements also, different kinds of papers to also complete the look. This is going pretty fast. I'm adding a little medium to this, and I'm going to pick up, there's a little bit of parchment here, but I think I'll leave that for now and just stay with the colors. And even as I lose some of the shading in the back, I could pick some up from the other side. So don't be too hasty to keep adding on the paint when you have the paint already at your disposal here. It's already on the canvas, so pull it over if you can. And even that, the textural feel of that, and creating a little bit of vibrancy in the background with your brush strokes will definitely add to your piece, even if this is just the bottom layer. So we're not going to spend a lot of time, we're just looking at coverage right now. There's more to come. So I'm going to do the background. I don't think you need to see me paint it all. I think I'll just do it and come back. Okay, so we're back to looking at the painting. It's pretty simple at this stage. Let's see what it looks like when we start putting the pieces together. Here we go with our house. It's like a bit of a puzzle piece right now. This is relatively dry, so we can just kind of loosely place it. We'll worry about the perfection a little later and see how everything looks. Adding some trees is important. I think it just adds a little bit more to the background to make it look less stark. Our little guy we can put here. And on its own, it probably stands. I don't know. I'm still trying to debate with myself, decide whether I want to put the sheep in, but there's something about the sheep that adds that little extra to the piece. So I think I will keep it. So my next stage is to do what we've done in other former pieces. We're going to lay it down with the matte medium, and then we're going to paint in what we need to do to make it a little bit more complete and realistic. Because we don't want the trees just to be sitting there like a clump. Well, maybe you do, but personally I'd like them to blend in a little bit better. And the same with all the other figures and the structures. Okay, so let's just see what happens. I'm just gonna let this dry for a minute, and then we're gonna come back. I think what I'll do is put the matte medium on and burnish it down, and then come back and show you. Okay, we're back after I've used the medium to secure the images to the background. And something that I always remember to do when I'm doing a background is to save some of the paint from what I've previously used for the background to add to my to be able to blend in later, like for the trees, for instance. Those are a little bit more, I like them a little more transparent, but let's just see if we can do that. They were rather dark to start with, so I want to make sure they come through a little bit. And the background, I mean, it is obvious that the trees are not, that are sort of plunk there to some degree, but I think that later we can correct that a little bit, work around the edges. So here's my tip to not do what I do, not what I say, and not what I do. But I would use more medium than I did initially with your trees, because it's a little darker than I like. I like the trees to come through, but if you do put too much paint, using some medium and kind of brushing the paint off with the medium will bring back your details. I very rarely get a manicure because the medium always destroys my nails. So that's one of my trade secrets. Don't use nail polish. Okay. So there, it's a little better. We'll see what it looks like when it dries, because the medium can be a little cloudy when you first use it. Something else I've done here, which I'm not crazy about, is I've brought over some blue from my brush onto the house. And in this case, I really don't want to use that. I'll stay with, I would like to keep it more white. So I just sort of paint that back a little, and if you want, again, not to lose the line work too much, you can use a little white and then pick up some medium and use that as well until you're satisfied with what you, because sometimes the paint can take off too much of the details of the photograph. It's a little tricky, but it's good to use a little bit just to kind of get the color you want, but not too much, not go overboard. So that's good. And now I'm going to use a little bit our lamb here, or sheep. We're just going to use a little white there too to brighten up the face. The other thing I do is usually skies, I don't like them to be overly simplistic. I like them to look like they have texture and clouds. So again, I've used some medium with my white, just so it's not like powder puffs of clouds in the sky. Although you might like that look, that's okay. I want it to look a little more natural. So I'll just spread the white. I don't use a lot of it, as you can see that the rooster's hungry. So this will give you a little bit more interest in your background. I hope that isn't too annoying for you in the background. Maybe I'm the only art video that has a rooster in the background. I'm wondering. Now he's really hamming it up. So I will use little bits of white to, oh, that's a bit too much. But again, if you use too much, just keep spreading it. Or you could take it off with a tissue if that works better for you. Leaving a little bit of the center, because that's sort of how clouds look. There's nothing really uniform about them, is there? There we go. Okay, so that's a little more cloud than I intended, but again, you can see how that adds to the background. And just see what happens there. Okay, our next step is to also paint into our foreground, into our figures, so that they pop up. We don't want them to look like a black and white picture there, but we also want them to look like they are the subject of the painting. So let's do that now. Pink for the cheeks and the lips, not too much. And sometimes if I'm not sure, I'll thin it a bit with medium too. I mean, you hardly see this, and that's okay, but you're just really trying to get an indication that there's a flesh tone and not overdo it, because you want to really keep, again, the details, and you'll just frustrate yourself. I may add a bit more to this later. This is where I stand right now, and again, we'll come back to it, a little bit of marker and probably a little bit more shading before I'm done. So we're back to this piece again, this painting, and you can see I've added some tent poles. I've extended them with little bits of cut out discarded photos on paper, and it kind of matches, so I thought that would work. And I decided to add a crow to the top because it felt a little blank with just the children. I just added a little bit more to it. I think it might be, I don't know if it has a little bit more of an eerie feeling, but it's certainly interesting to me. Now I have to decide what I want to do next, and I'm thinking what I'd like to do is add some, maybe a little red to the tent, and then work on the children's clothes and their features a little bit. And I'm not going to film all of this because you know the gist from my other paintings and from what I've demonstrated already. So I just want to continue on that vein, and I'll show you what I come up with in a moment or so. So I told you I wasn't going to come back until I finished it, but I thought I would just share a little bit with you, just to give you an idea that I start really gently with my color. I don't saturate it. I use it fairly lightly at first because I really want to see how this what transpires here. And I'll save this brush, or save the color for the cheeks on the children and the lips if it makes sense, and any other kind of red highlights. Okay, and what I've done in the meantime is I've painted in the part of the tent and some of the children's faces and a little bit of red and blue highlights on their clothing. The next part I will do is add a little bit of hair and maybe use a little bit of the brown that I use for the hair in the shading as well. So I don't think I need to go into too much explanation about this. It's really just adding a little touch of color, and quite honestly I'm working with a very dry brush here. I don't have a whole lot of paint. I'm just adding a little smidgen of color to make it come alive and to create that painterly effect that we're striving for. We might also add a little bit to the shadows too, where we see shadows. A little bit here and here. Not too much. You can see I use a very, very light touch. Again, that's accomplished by not having a lot of paint on the brush, and the paint that I do have is very dry. So I'm working almost like, it becomes almost like a pencil really, because it is so dry, but it allows me to put just the right amount of color on, and I can always add a little bit more later, but right now it keeps the color in check and in control. So you can see how that already brings the children a little bit more to life than just the flat gray photograph. The only other things I think I may work on here is I might highlight the crow a little bit more, add a little more black to the crow, and I'm not sure, I may also darken the top part of the painting in a graduated effect, just again for a little bit more drama. All right, so let's see what happens. So here I am adding a little bit more color to the top of the painting with this brush. It does do the job though. And I'm going to have to step back and look at this in a moment to see if I accomplish what I think I want to accomplish. I've added a little bit of medium to the paint as well, around the crow. And again, gradually lightening it as we go lower into the painting. So we're looking for that kind of effect to try to just create a little bit more interest at the top without changing the background profoundly, just a little bit extra. And see if that is really the effect that I'm striving for. I have to keep working my brush strokes in to blend, because at this point I want it to look very harmonized at the top. So you can see that just gives a little extra. I might also add a little more parchment at the bottom too to highlight that. On my first run, I'm never sure whether it's capturing the exact effect that I want. So that's really the value of looking at it the next day. I'm doing this the day after, and it's given me a better perspective to be able to come back and look at it and see whether I like it or not, or if I want to make changes. So take your time and look at it with a critical eye, because you can come back to it and just make some decisions later. So I think this is pretty well near completion. I may add a few other details, but I think I've given you the general idea of how I work with the backgrounds and how I build up the foreground and how I make changes as I go along, because I think it sometimes takes a second view and a second look, or even a third look at your work to get a real critical analysis of whether this is the right piece and if it's saying what you want to say in the story. I really enjoyed working on this one. This is kind of interesting how it's come together, and I hope you enjoyed this as well. The other thing I hope that I illustrated is that you can really have fun with your interpretation of a painting. You can start at one place and end at another, and it'll still be fabulous. Okay, so here we go, another look at the lads. I think this one is fairly completed. I've added a few details, a bit of plum in his outfit. I was going to go for pure red, and then to me it felt a little too striking for this picture with its moodiness, so I kept it more subtle with a plum. I added a little bit more white into the sky for clouds, just for a touch more contrast, as well as into the roof. I carried it over a little because I had cut off the edge of that roof. And in the paneling, I just subtly added a bit of umber mixed with white here and there, just to give it more of a distressed look, a little more white on the sheep. So not too much has changed, but I think that's enough. That's the finishing touches that I'm happy with right now to complete the story. So you can see how it's come together, and I hope you enjoyed the process. Hi, back again with the abstract project, and I just wanted to let you know that in your absence, I added a little bit of mark making, you might call it. I got a little bit crazy with my dots. I started to add dots to her, or kind of almost like a pointillism to her blouse, and then I just decided to carry that into the background a little bit. So again, it's just a playful way of adding to your piece and seeing what happens. And I like the liveliness of this. I think it actually pulls together quite nicely. So I'll leave it like this for now. And again, I may look back on another day and decide to do more, but for now I'm pretty happy with it. So let's leave her as she is. Our abstracted woman with Jack Russell.